Borthakur IAS Academy, an endeavor of excellence.
Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome to Borthakur's IAS Academy, Northeast's premier institute for UPSC, APSC and NPSC preparations. I'm your friend Atri and today I'm here with another segment of Current Affairs 365 dated 13th of May 2021. This is your one-stop solution for all the news and updates which will help you to prepare for your civil services examination, and along with it, it is also going to be useful for any other competitive examination. Please like and share this video, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook as well as Instagram. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first news of today is regarding the new banking reforms which needs to be introduced in our country so as to boost our country's economy. This particular news was recently published in the Hindu Business Line, which and the article was titled as Time for Fifth Generation Banking Reforms. Here we will discuss the evolution of Indian banking system. Okay, we will see how generation wise the banking system it evolved. Okay, and India became economically more stable, and also along with this we will see the inclusion of fifth generation banking reforms. What are the reforms that our government is planning, okay, that needs to be included, and how it will boost our economy further. So now first let us have a look at the evolution of banking industry, how generation wise our banking sector it evolved, okay, and what were the changes with each generation, and also the problems related with these particular years. Okay, so the first generation banking, it is mainly during the period of pre-independence up to the year of 1947, and during the Swadeshi movements our country it witnessed the birth of many small and local banks. However, there were certain problems which were related with these local banks. Okay, they failed mainly because of the internal frauds, interconnected lending, and also the combination of trading and banking, because they combined trading with banking. So these were the reasons why the small and local banks failed at that point of time, and moreover the people also were not very keen to invest their money, okay, to deposit their money or save their have an account in those small or local banks. They were not, many of them were actually not aware of this system also. Okay, second came the second generation banking, and that was a period from 1947 to 67. Here our country, they saw certain concentration of resources. Okay, certain banks, they provided this concentration of resources through retail deposits, but these were limited to only a few influential and rich business families or groups, and therefore it neglected the credit flow to agriculture, and this was the main reason why the agricultural sector it could not prosper, and the farmers also they led a uncomfortable life. Okay, their life was not very, they didn't get good values for their products. Okay, so that was the main reason why the agricultural sector and also the farmers they could not prosper in this particular period. Then coming to the third generation banking from 67 to 1991, here the government was successful in breaking this nexus between industry and banks by nationalizing 20 major private banks in 2 phases. Okay, and also it introduced priority sector lending. So these initiatives of the third generation banking, it resulted in the shift from class banking to mass banking. People became more familiar with the banking sector. Okay, and another positive impact was the expansion of branch networks across the rural areas of our country, which led to massive mobilization of public deposits and also incremented credit flow to the agricultural and allied sector. So this helped the agricultural sector to prosper, okay, during the period of 1967 to 1991. Now coming to the fourth generation banking, this period can be seen as a period of landmark reforms. Okay, this is the period from 1991 to 2014, where issue of fresh licenses to the private and foreign banks was done in order to infuse competition and also to enhance the productivity and efficiency. So this was mainly done by introducing prudential norms, providing operational flexibility, and also the focus was on to implement the best corporate government practices. Okay, and this was done by strengthening of the capital base as per the Basel norms. So this fourth generation banking, it continued up to 2014, and since 2014, which is now it is the current model, okay, the banking sector, it witnessed the adoption of the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and Mobile Trinity, and also licenses were issued to the payment banks and small finance banks, which further resulted in achieving the connectivity, last mile connectivity in the financial inclusion drive. So this was all about the evolution of banking industry up to the current model. Now the government and also the current situation, it is demanding that we need to shift our current model to the next generation banking, to the fifth generation banking, okay, because of the growing population of our country and also because of the pressure of COVID-19 pandemic. So what are the things that needs to be included in this fifth generation banking that are explained under the following heads? First one is the big banks. The Narasimhan Committee report of 1991, it emphasized that India should have at least 3 to 4 large commercial banks with domestic as well as international presence, along with the foreign banks. And the second tier, it will comprise of several mid-sized lenders, which will include the niche banks with a economy-wide presence. Okay. Also, there is a need for differentiated banks, specialized banks, which will cater to the specific and the varied requirements of different customers and borrowers. Okay. And also this, they can work to provide access to finance in areas like retail, agriculture, MSMEs, etc. This will have access to the low cost public deposits, and for this will also provide better asset liability management. Other than these, the other options includes blockchain banking. Other reforms, they includes blockchain banking, mitigating moral hazard, empowering the banks, etc. So all these can be done, and since there is a need to reform the banking industry further, so these are certain way forwards which can be considered in order to strengthen our economy, further improve the resilience and financial stability of our country. The second news is about a biodegradable yoga mat which has been developed by 6 young girls from Assam. Okay, and this particular mat is 100% biodegradable and compostable. It is named as Moorhen Yoga Mat after the name of Kam Sorai, which is a purple moorhen, a resident of the Deepor Bill Wildlife Sanctuary. Okay, it is a resident bird of Deepor Bill Wildlife Sanctuary. As I have already mentioned, it is 100% biodegradable and compostable. Okay, it is developed from water hyacinth. This mat, it can improve the aquatic ecosystem of Deepor Bill by as the water hyacinth there will be removed for its production. Okay, and it will help the sustainable production of utility products, which will include community engagement and thus will generate livelihood for the indigenous communities. And this is in line with the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. Okay, we all know about water hyacinth. It is a type of invasive floating plant found in water bodies across the world, and what it does, it blocks the sunlight reaching the water level. Okay, and also the oxygen level of the water drops because of its presence, and this results in damaging the water quality and also affecting the life forms in the ecosystem. It also has an effect on the irrigation, hydroelectric generation and navigation of the particular area. Now coming to Deepor Bill, we all know that it is a wetland which is found which is located in the southwest part of Guwahati city and is considered to be one of the large and important riverine wetlands in the Brahmaputra valley of Lower Assam. Deepor Bill has both biological and environment significance because it is the only major stormwater storage basin of the Guwahati city, and because of the large congregation of aquatic birds in Assam during winter at this site, it is considered as one of the staging sites for migratory birds, and therefore it has been selected as one of the important bird area sites by the BirdLife International. And also another point is to be noted here, Dipor Bill has been designated as a Ramsar site in November 2002. So next news is about the 4th Indo-Swiss Financial Dialogue, which was recently held virtually over a video conference. And the key highlights of this dialogue, we will have a look at them here. First of all, they had talks for collaboration on various investment aspects: International Financial Service Center Authority, National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, FinTech, and Sustainable Finance and Cross-Border Financial Services. Then they had a discussion on certain matters which are related to the G20, International Monetary Fund, tax challenges arising from digitalization of the economy, and also lastly they emphasized on the importance of coordinated bilateral action to have a clean and resilient post-COVID world. Now if we have a look at the Indo-Swiss relations, okay, from the very beginning, then politically a treaty of friendship was signed between India and Switzerland in the year 1948. As early as 1948, just after India's independence, we had good political relations with Switzerland, okay. And also India's policy of non-alignment has a quite close understanding with the Switzerland's traditional policy of neutrality. So this is another reason why both the countries seems to be quite politically aligned, okay. Coming to economic relations, then India and Switzerland's bilateral investment treaty, it is under negotiation, and there are also talks on the India and European Free Trade Association partnership, okay. European Free Trade Association is an intergovernmental organization of Iceland, Norway and Switzerland. Then we can also have a look at the cooperation of both the nations in other areas like the Indo-Swiss Joint Research Program, which was launched in the year 2005. Then capacity building for low carbon and climate resilient city development capacities, okay. And lastly, skill training. There are several institutes from both the countries which have collaborated to impart the highest standards of skill training in India. So these are the ways in which both the nations are cooperating, and they have quite good bilateral ties with each other right from the year 1948. Now the next news is regarding sovereign gold bond scheme, okay, of the 21-22 series. Government of India, in consultation with the Reserve Bank of India, they have decided to issue the sovereign gold bonds in 6 tranches from May 21 to September 2021. The key points of this particular scheme includes the issuance, okay. First of all, these gold bonds are issued as Government of India stock under the Government Securities Act of 2006, and these will be issued by the Reserve Bank of India on behalf of Government of India. These bonds, sovereign gold bonds, they were launched in November 2015 as an objective to reduce the demand for physical gold and also to shift a part of the domestic savings which were either originally used for the purchase of gold into the financial savings. And the gold bond prices, they are linked to the price of 24 karat pure gold, and it is published by the India Bullion and Jewelers Association, Mumbai. These bonds can be purchased in multiple of 1 unit, and there are certain thresholds for different investors, but the minimum permissible investment is 1 gram of gold. And these bonds, they come up with a maturity period of 8 years, and the option to exit the investment is after the first 5 years. The interest rate here is fixed at 2.5% per annum, and these bonds can be used as collateral for loans. However, the only disadvantage which is related to investing in this sovereign gold bond scheme is that these are long-term investment, and unlike physical gold, they cannot be sold immediately. Next, we will discuss about the Mission for Integrated Development of Horticulture. Recently, the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, they have allocated rupees 2,250 crore for the year of 21-22 under in the name of this particular scheme. Okay, so what is horticulture? We all know it is the branch of plant agriculture which deals with garden crops, fruits, vegetables and ornamental plants. Now, if you know the name of father of Indian horticulture, then do mention it in the comment section. Okay, I will tell you the name tomorrow. Now let us have a look at the key points of this particular mission. Okay, Mission for Integrated Development of Horticulture. It is a centrally sponsored scheme for the holistic growth of horticulture sector, which covers fruits, vegetables, roots and tuber crops. The nodal ministry is Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, and this particular scheme is implemented under the Green Revolution Krishonnati Yojana. Under this particular scheme, the Government of India, it contributes 60% of the total outlay for the developmental programs in all the states except for states of the Northeast and the Himalayas, and the rest 40% share is contributed by the state governments. But in case of the northeastern states and Himalayan states, the Government of India, it contributes 90%. Now, if we have a look at the achievements of this mission, then we can see that during the year of 2019-20, our country recorded its highest ever horticulture production. Also, this particular mission, it played a significant role in increasing the area under horticulture crops, which improved the quality of produce and productivity of farmland. However, there are certain challenges still which our horticulture sector is facing, because a lot of problem is seen in terms of post-harvest loss and gaps in post-harvest management and supply chain infrastructure. So overall, we can see that there is a tremendous scope for enhancing the productivity of Indian horticulture, and it is imperative to cater to the country's estimated demand of around 650 million metric tons of fruits and vegetables by the year 2050. This was all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was useful for you all. Please like and share this video, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I'll see you all again tomorrow with another session of Current Affairs 365 only at Borthakur's IAS Academy, Northeast's premier institute for UPSC, APSC and NPSC preparations. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS Academy প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS Academy